Every organization, whether it's a tiny startup or a huge multinational, they all face this core challenge. How do you actually grow? And maybe just as important, how do you manage that growth once you have it? It's this, dynamic puzzles, and it really shapes the big strategic moves we see happening out there. So today, our mission is to really take a deep dive into strategic development. We've looked at core business strategy ideas and some really interesting real-world examples. We want to unpack the different ways companies try to expand, buying others, growing internally, and then look at these sophisticated tools they use, like the BCG matrix or the Ashridge matrix, to manage everything. We want to give you a clearer picture of the options, the implications, so you can kind of see the strategy behind the headlines.
That's right. So over the next few minutes, we'll first explore these different ways of pursuing strategic direction, acquiring, growing from within, maybe forming partnerships. And then, we'll shift focus to how organizations actually assess and manage their whole collection of businesses or products using these powerful frameworks that, they're designed to show the strategic health of the company.
Okay, let's get into this then. It's clear there isn't just one single way for a business to grow, right? Companies have this whole toolkit, really, options available, and each one has its good points and its tricky bits. One of the biggest ones people talk about is the buy approach, acquisitions and mergers.
Absolutely. And, while lots of people use merger and acquisition almost interchangeably for strategists, that difference is actually quite important. A merger typically is more like a pooling of interests between two businesses. You often end up with common ownership, maybe a totally new entity that's jointly managed. Legally, it's often a share-for-share thing, so you can think of it more like a collaboration. Staff might feel more involved because there's this sense of mutual decision-making, building something new together.
Right, so everyone feels a bit more like an equal partner. But an acquisition, that's a whole different beast, as they say.
It really is. An acquisition usually involves a bigger company, the predator buying a smaller one, the target. And that often feels more top-down, The acquired business is definitely the less powerful partner in that scenario. Acquisitions are often cash or debt deals for the target stock. It gives the buyer more immediate control, sure, but, you can also get more resistance from the staff sometimes.
Okay, so even with those potential integration headaches, what really pulls companies in is that promise of speed, isn't it? And getting that immediate jump in scale, you're basically buying expertise, market share, infrastructure, instead of building it all yourself from scratch.
And that speed, it often connects to chasing synergistic gains. That's the really compelling idea, isn't it? That the combined company is worth more than just the two parts separately, the classic, 1 + 1 = 3 idea. And these synergies, they can pop up in a few key ways. For profitability, you might get cost synergies like sharing staff, economies of scale, consolidating back office stuff, or maybe sales synergies like sharing customer lists or using combined distribution channels.
And it's not just about the bottom line, is it? There are financial angles too, and market position benefits.
Definitely. An improved financial position might come from using assets better together, maybe getting keeper financing because you're bigger, or smoothing out cash flows. For example, buying a business whose busy season is different from yours. And then, market position sharing skills, reducing overall risk because you're more diversified, maybe even bringing in better management practices across the board.
Let's make this concrete. We have this Blueberry hotel chain example.
Yeah.
Okay, so Blueberry is a luxury resort chain, but its reputation is a bit tarnished, and its business is very seasonal. Now, they're thinking about buying the Villa d'Ouest, this luxury place on Lake Como. It has amazing spa facilities, apparently, and makes money pretty much all year round. So what could buying this place do for Blueberry?
Right. Well, this acquisition, it could give Blueberry something really important to stand out those top-tier spa facilities. But maybe even more crucially, it could stabilize those seasonal cash flow swings by bringing in revenue all year. And there's also the chance to boost Blueberry's image by linking up with a hotel that has this great international reputation. Those are all, classic synergy arguments.
But here's the kicker, isn't it? Studies often show that a huge number, maybe even most, mergers and acquisitions don't actually deliver the synergies they promised. So why is buying often so risky?
Well, acquisitions are they're notoriously expensive and incredibly complex. The financial hit can be massive. And like you said, those synergies, they don't just happen automatically. Integration is really tough. Cultural clashes are incredibly common between the two teams. And often, the buyer inherits all the target's hidden problems along with its good bits. Plus, you can run into legal hurdles like competition law that can really slow things down, sometimes even stop the deal entirely.
Wow, that sounds like a minefield. And this brings us to something really important but often overlooked. This idea of corporate parenting,
It's about the relationship between the head office, the parent, and its business units, especially after they buy one. Does the parent actually add value? Maybe through resources or special skills or expertise, providing shared IT, perhaps centralized R&D, maybe access to cheaper funding, or does it actually destroy value through, say, huge central overhead costs or rigid rules that kill innovation or just bad decisions about where to put money? That question gets really sharp when you bring a new acquisition into the family.
Exactly. A good parent helps its kids thrive. A bad one just drains them. It really sets a high standard for making an acquisition worthwhile.
Okay, so acquisitions need a parent that genuinely adds value. But what if a company wants to grow without, adopting new kids at all? That leads us to organic growth, which is, well, completely different, the grow from within strategy.
Right. Organic growth is all about developing your strategy internally, maybe starting a new division or expanding what you already do, launching new products using your own teams and resources.
So what's the main argument for doing it maybe the slow way, growing organically?
Well, it lets you spread the costs out over time, which can be helpful. And it totally sidesteps those cultural clashes and control issues we just talked about with acquisitions. You can develop things gradually so it feels less risky, and honestly, it's easier to just stop if it's not working out. Sometimes you can even get government grants for internal development too.
Okay, so it sounds safer, maybe more controlled, but I guess there must be downsides too.
Oh, sure, organic growth can be slow, and that might not sit well with shareholders who want to see quick expansion. You might also just lack the experience needed for a completely new area. You could face high barriers to entry trying to build from scratch. And sometimes finding financing for purely internal projects can be tougher. Plus, there's a real risk of stretching your existing managers too thin if you pile too many new internal initiatives on them.
Let's go back to Blueberry for a sec. The source material suggests that maybe instead of buying Villa d'Ouest, Blueberry should actually focus on improving the facilities and the quality in the hotels it already owns. That's basically choosing organic growth, isn't it?
It absolutely is. It tackles their core problem, which seems to be inconsistent quality across their existing places, something buying another hotel wouldn't necessarily fix. And of course, it avoids spending that huge $50 million asking price. It's a classic strategic dilemma. Fix your own house first or buy the shiny new one next door.
Moving on then, we've got strategic alliances and joint ventures, the partner strategy. This feels like a kind of middle way, not buying outright, not just doing it all yourself. So what exactly is a strategic alliance?
Yeah, it's a cooperative venture, really, between two or more separate companies working together for some strategic goal. They figure out how to allocate ownership, responsibilities, the risks, the rewards. But crucially, each company keeps its own separate identity. Now, these alliances can be anything from quite informal agreements right through to very formal joint ventures. The technical difference with a joint venture is that it actually creates a new separate business entity that the partners own together.
So why partner up? What are the main advantages companies see?
Well, the big ones are usually sharing costs and risks, especially for really big, expensive projects. You also get to learn from your partner, maybe access strategic capabilities or technologies that neither of you has alone. It lets each partner focus on what they do best, and it can definitely reduce political or cultural risks, particularly if you're trying to enter a tricky new international market.
But partnerships aren't always smooth sailing either, I imagine. What makes an alliance actually work well?
No, they definitely have challenges. You can get disputes between the partners. Maybe one side isn't as committed as the other. You can run into issues like transfer pricing between them. Our sources point to a few key things for a good alliance. There needs to be real strategic synergy. The combined effort is genuinely stronger. There should be a clear positioning opportunity. Often it works best when resources are limited so the partners complement each other. Reduced risk is key. And you need a cooperative spirit, real clarity about the purpose, and fundamentally a structure where everyone feels like it's a win-win, where the risks and rewards are shared fairly.
Let's think about an example. Say, an oil company that's under a lot of pressure to get into renewable energy. How could partnering help them?
That's a great example. In that kind of situation, yeah, a strategic alliance or maybe a joint venture with other energy companies or perhaps even research institutions could be a really smart way to share those huge R&D costs needed for developing new renewable tech. They could share findings, and actually working together could give them a much stronger voice when lobbying governments too. So they share the cost burden, but also the potential upside.
Okay, our last method here is franchising the license and scale approach. We see this absolutely everywhere, right? Coffee shops, fast food, gyms. How does that model work at its core?
Right. So with franchising, the main company, the franchisor, grants a license to someone else, the franchisee. And that license lets the franchise use the brand name, the reputation, the operating systems. The franchise pays for those rights, of course, and then runs the actual day-to-day business. But they often get quite a bit of support back from the franchisor, things like marketing help, maybe product R&D, training programs.
So for the main company, the franchisor, what's the big appeal?
It's mainly about rapid expansion. You can grow your market share really quickly with relatively little capital investment from your side. You also get to benefit from the franchisee's local market knowledge, which can be invaluable. And the financial risk for each individual outlet is much lower for the franchisor. Plus, as the whole network grows, you start getting significant economies of scale, especially in things like national advertising.
And what about for the person buying the franchise, the franchisee?
Well, for them, they get to jump in with a tested brand name, a proven business format, maybe established products. That really cuts down the learning curve and reduces the risk compared to starting a totally new business from scratch. And they usually get training and ongoing support, which is a huge help, especially if they're new to running a business.
It sounds pretty good for both sides, but there must be downsides too.
Oh yeah, definitely. For the franchisor, well, they have to share the profits from each unit. And there's always a risk of losing some control over quality and consistency across all the different locations. That can damage the brand if it's not managed well. For the franchisee, the main thing is less independence. You have to follow the rules. And sometimes the franchisor's central strategy might clash with what seems best locally. There's also this interesting risk that if a franchisee becomes really successful, they might eventually decide to break away and just become a direct competitor.
Okay, let's picture a company that's invented, I don't know, uniquely good ice cream, and they want to set up shops all over the world. Franchising seems like a perfect fit there, doesn't it?
Absolutely. It would let them expand quickly, get that global reach, leverage local know-how in all those different markets, but still maintain control over the brand and the product quality through the franchise agreement and support systems. It's a classic use case for franchising.
So figuring out how to grow is one major piece of the puzzle. But then, as companies get bigger and more complex, maybe through some of these methods we've discussed, the challenge shifts, doesn't it? It becomes about how you manage this sprawling empire of different businesses or products. And that's where portfolio analysis really comes into its own.
Exactly. That's how you start making sense of all the complexity. Portfolio analysis, it helps you see the bigger picture. Like, does the company have too many products in declining markets? Are there enough new growth opportunities coming through? Are the profitable parts actually generating enough cash to fund the future? It's like a strategic health check for the whole organization.
And probably the most famous tool for this is the BCG Growth Share Matrix from the Boston Consulting Group. I think most people have seen that 2x2 grid, right? With the stars, cash cows, problem children, and dogs. But maybe we should quickly recap what they mean, and more importantly, where the real strategic thinking comes in beyond just the labels.
Sure. So it classifies businesses or products based on two things: their relative market share, which is a proxy for competitive strength, and the market growth rate, which measures how attractive the market itself is. So you've got the cash cow, high market share, but in a low growth market. These guys basically print money, generating way more cash than they need just to hold their position. The sources mention Fruity Drinks' orange juice sells tons in a mature market. That's a classic cash cow. Then Star, high market share and in a high growth market. Great future potential, but they often soak up a lot of cash just to defend their position because everyone wants a piece of a high growth market. The idea is that stars eventually mature into cash cows as the market slows down. The problem child, or question mark. This one's tricky. Low market share, but in a high growth market. Needs a lot of cash pumped in just to keep up, let alone gain share. It's high risk, but potentially high reward if you can turn it into a star. Fruity Drinks pomegranate juice was the example, difficult to make, low share currently, but in a rapidly expanding niche market. And finally, the dog. Low market share, low growth market. These often lose money or just break even, and their future prospects look pretty limited.
Okay, and the simple version of BCG suggests clear strategies, right? Like milk your cash cows for cash, invest heavily in your stars, decide whether to invest in or divest your problem children, and get rid of the dogs. But it can't be that simple, can it? This is where the real strategic nuance comes in, challenging that sort of textbook view.
Absolutely not that simple. Nuance is everything here. You know, a cash cow might not be easily milkable if the market, even though mature, is still fiercely competitive. Or maybe milking it too hard could actually damage its long-term position. The sources mentioned in the New York Times clearly establish you might think cash cow, but it has reported losses, showing even dominant players can struggle. And it's not just about dogs being potential loss leaders either. Sometimes a so-called dog might be strategically vital. Maybe it defends a key flank against a competitor. Or perhaps it's essential to keep a major customer happy. Or maybe it's even a low-margin entry point needed to eventually access a future high-growth area. You always have to dig deeper and justify why a particular strategy makes sense in context, not just follow the label on the box.
That's a really important point. And interestingly, this BCG idea, it's even been adapted for public sector organizations. That seems like quite a leap from commercial business.
It is an interesting adaptation. The public sector portfolio matrix uses different dimensions, obviously. Instead of market share and growth, it might look at something like public need and funding effectiveness, basically, how desirable the service is, and value for money, how efficiently it's delivered. And that creates its own set of quadrants, like public sector stars or political hot boxes. The big challenge, of course, is that these dimensions are much more subjective than market share. And also, many public services simply have to be provided by law, no matter where they might theoretically land on such a matrix.
Okay, so that brings us to one more powerful tool, the Ashridge portfolio display, sometimes called the parenting matrix. This one seems to shift the focus pretty dramatically, looking specifically at the role of the corporate parent in creating value.
It absolutely does. That's its unique contribution. This matrix asks, does the corporate parent, the head office, actually add or destroy value in the businesses it owns? And it looks at that through two key questions. First, how well do the parent's skills and resources match the opportunities to actually help that specific business unit, the parenting opportunities? And second, how well do those parent skills align with what that business unit needs to succeed its critical success factors? It's all about the fit between the parent and the child business.
Right, so it really zooms in on that parent-child dynamic within the larger corporation. What are the main categories it uses?
Okay, so you have heartland businesses. Here, there's a high fit on both dimensions. The parent understands the business and has the specific skills to add significant value. These should be absolutely core to the company's future strategy. Then you have ballast businesses. Here, the parent understands the business well. Maybe they've owned it for ages, but honestly, there aren't many more opportunities for the parent to actively help improve it. These businesses might actually do better if they were just left alone or maybe even sold off.
Okay, and what about the riskier categories?
Right, those are the value trap businesses. This is where it gets dangerous. There might seem to be lots of opportunities for the parent to get involved, but there's a poor fit between those opportunities and what the parent is actually good at. So there's a high chance the parent will jump in and actually destroy value by meddling in things it doesn't understand. And finally, alien territory. This is a complete mismatch. The parent doesn't understand the business, doesn't have the skills to help it. These units absolutely should be divested. There's also a category called Edge of Heartland, kind of in between, where there's a good fit in some ways, but maybe a poor fit in others. These could potentially move into Heartland if the parent develops a better understanding or skills.
Let's use that Enerdeer example again to make it clearer. Enerdeer started in fast food, right? But then it diversified into trendy hotels, commercial property, even jeans manufacturing. Its core skill was identifying food trends. So how might those different businesses fit on the Ashridge matrix?
Okay, well, Anudir's original fast food outlets, they'd likely be Heartland or maybe Ballast if they're very mature and the parent can't add much more value. That's their core competence. Now, the trendy hotels, that looks like a classic value trap. Anudir might think, oh, we know food trends, hotels have restaurants, but the critical success factors for running a hotel are much broader marketing, complex staffing, property management, cost control. Anudir's food skills probably don't match those needs well, so they risk destroying value. And the commercial property development and jeans manufacturing, based on their food trend skill set, those look like clear alien territory, just a complete mismatch. The parent can't realistically add any value there.
So it really drives home the point, doesn't it? It's not just about what the business unit does on its own, but how well the parent company, the head office, can actually help it succeed. This framework is a great reminder that corporate structure isn't just about control. It's really about whether that central parent enhances its businesses or actually holds them back.
Precisely. It's about making sure the parent's unique capabilities and resources are genuinely positively contributing to the success across that whole diverse portfolio.
Wow. Okay, what a deep dive that was. We've really covered a lot of ground here. a whole range of ways companies can develop strategically, from the speed and maybe synergy hopes of acquisitions to the more measured pace of organic growth and that collaborative approach of alliances and franchising. And then we explore these really powerful tools like the BCG and Ashridge matrices, which give us these frameworks for understanding and actually managing an organization's mix of businesses.
Yeah, and I think the common thread running through all of this, all these strategies and tools, is just this constant need for organizations to make really smart, informed choices about where they put their energy and their money. It's all about optimizing for growth, yeah, but also managing risk effectively and ultimately ensuring the company can sustain itself in the long run, especially when things are always changing out there.
So here's something for you, the listener, to think about. As you look at companies around you, maybe one you really admire for how it's grown, or perhaps one that seems to be facing some big challenges, which of these strategic development methods do you think they've used well, or maybe struggled with? And can you see how they might be using some form of portfolio analysis, even if they don't call it BCG or Ashridge, to guide their decisions? The more you start looking through these lenses, the more you'll see these strategic frameworks playing out everywhere.